The childhood, it seems like one traumatic event after another. One of the worst times of my life. I think I was 50 years old at that point, and it wasn't until therapy that I realized how much my childhood had affected the rest of my life. I think that it really helped because it gave me a purpose. When you first saw your newborn child, you fall in love in a way that you've never felt before or never knew existed, really. That happened to me even as 17 as a mom. I was leaving somebody at a very difficult time in their life. My own mental health was declining, trying to help him with his mental health. I can't live like that, so I'm divorcing. But the most important thing that I learned about myself in therapy is that I matter. I am married for the third time. This relationship is completely different than the others. It's feeling comfortable and feeling at peace within yourself.
Good evening and morning at the
Good
same time.
morning.
Pamela, welcome to the Whereabouts Tales podcast. Today's guest is Pamela Topjian.
Topjian? Yep.
Topjian.
You can say it correctly
I
if you want.
tried. Pamela, fun on the side, is a survival, a healer, and author of whose journey from trauma to transformation and purpose is nothing short of inspiring. So I was telling Pamela before we start to record this that I'm impressed by a story, and I'm looking forward to be able to share it in my podcast because I think it's an impressive life story and it can bring a lot of value to a lot of people.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I will start with a quote, Pamela, that I think it's nice to use for the beginning of this discussion. You are saying in one of the podcasts, I left this husband that was an alcoholic, drug abuser who abused me. I went down a path of deep depression, high anxiety, and got on this bus. Sort of last-ditch effort.
Yeah, absolutely.
Impressive. I only in one sentence. I loved it, and I said, okay, I have to say it before we start the discussion. But let's go back to your upbringing.
Okay.
How was the childhood? Or maybe you can say shortly where are you originally coming from?
I am from, so I live in the U.S., and I am from the Midwest, from the suburbs of Chicago is where I grew up. And I don't know if that's really considered the Midwest, but I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago in Illinois. And I moved around quite a bit, but my whole childhood was in Illinois in different places. So now, after getting on that bus, I'm in California, which is the West Coast of the U.S. So the childhood was, just, it seems like one traumatic event after another. I had my father was not in the picture after my parents divorced at 9 years old. And then we had lived in poverty. So that means moving around a lot. That means often hungry. And for me, I was alone a lot. And that caused me to get into situations that weren't so healthy. I had no guidance or supervision a lot of the time. And I ended up with, I don't know what words we can say on here, but, having some dates that were, that the R word, some date R's and some SA happening in my early teens. And my sister was killed in a car accident. So, I talked about moving around a lot. We were evicted at least once, maybe twice from an apartment that we lived in. Yeah, so that's how my childhood was. There wasn't much, not much good to talk about. So many people say about, if I could go back to childhood, I'd like things. It's like that was one of the worst times of my life. So, yeah, nothing good about childhood except for I didn't have arthritis, which I do now.
This is this is the the most positive way in which you can present those events.
Real talk here.
Exactly. Yeah. It's impressive because, like you said, everybody is remembering childhood about that. Is remembering that nice period. And I will
Hmm.
try to make a small comparison. I'm originally from Romania, and I don't know if you know the history of Romania, but we come from a communist background. It was a dictatorship for long years, and um, the youth of us is so hard
Mm.
established in our brain that everybody's thinking about the dictatorship period as being a good period, but just
Mm.
because it was the youth, not because it was anything good happening in that period.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's important to mention that and to do this parallel and to say that in your case you're just saying no, I have nothing good to remember about it, which is it's it must have been hard. So
Yeah.
how how do you navigate that? How do you I have I have so many questions, but I don't know how to ask them, and I'm sorry for this. But um how do you perceive that as a child?
Well, I didn't even realize until, you had mentioned, what I had said on another podcast or on another video about, getting on that bus finally and having a big breakdown after my second divorce. Um, so it wasn't until I got therapy after that time. So I was already, I think I was 50 years old at that point. And it wasn't until therapy that I realized how much my childhood had affected the rest of my life. I just went through life thinking, well, we were poor. A lot of people had it so much worse. And, these are the kinds of things that happen when you don't have parents around, when
Hmm.
you live in different places that are not the best places. Definitely abuse and horrible things happen in affluent neighborhoods as well, but I think it just happens more prevalent maybe in these sort of, poverty-stricken areas. So I just felt like, you know, people have it so much worse and we were just poor and those are the kinds of things that happen. I didn't really give it too much thought,
Hmm.
never sort of processed through all of the trauma from my childhood, never even thought of it in that way until, like I said, after I had that big breakdown. And then, like a year later, probably not even a full year later, but when I went to therapy after that, that's when I realized how much trauma was in my childhood.
Hmm.
So, yeah, it was a big thing to work through. When I first went to therapy, I thought, my a medical doctor had suggested I go to therapy, and I thought, what am I gonna say? You know, I didn't even realize like what am I gonna go there for? I felt kind of, you know, I didn't feel like I had abuse in my childhood, and at that point, I had left the abusive husbands, and I thought, yay, it should be good now.
It it's interesting how we always think about abuse, mostly about the physical abuse. We never
Right.
talk about the mental abuse. I was reading in a book our reaction to abuse. It's incredible. It's so interesting how the brain is finding ways to protect ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
I've read the book. I don't know if you know David Goggins. He's quite popular now through the motivation books, but he has an interesting life story. And his mother life story said that nobody's talking about the variant of abuse in which you are frozen and you cannot go
Oh,
anywhere.
yeah.
Like you just stay there and you take everything in like nothing would happen. And I think that's the part of the abuse that nobody's talking about.
Right.
Um, was there even a time during those days when you felt protected from someone or something? Or
No, no. I was very fearful. I was very I had never felt like anything that I thought or anything that I felt mattered to anybody. And I was like just fearful a lot of my childhood. And I actually physically hid instead of going to
Mhm.
school or, just I didn't, was just sort of trying to blend in with my surroundings because I guess life was, not something I wanted to be a part of. And not to say that I ever thought of like unaliving myself or anything as a kid. I know there are some people that say they did think that way as a child, and that hurts my heart so bad. But I never felt in that way. Just sort of wanting to blend in with the background of my surroundings and not have to try to live and navigate through life because I didn't have any guidance or supervision. I didn't know how to do that, and it wasn't working well for me. So I feel like I was waiting to be an adult and have my own control over my own life.
Have you thought that the adulthood would be an exit, an escape way, or you just thought this is gonna be your life forever?
I think that I had some hope that,
Mm-hmm.
once I'm an adult, I can kind of live more in, you know, have my own life and be in more control of my own life.
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, when I was in high school, I never knew that it was possible to go to college. Now, I don't know what it is in different areas, but I never knew that you could go to college even if you were a poor person. I thought, I don't have that opportunity because we don't have any money, even
Mm-hmm.
for food, let alone college. So, I just, I had kind of given up on living my life to the fullest, I guess I should say, and I was a pregnant mom. I was a pregnant mom. I was a pregnant teen. I was a teen mom. And that was, I think, a direct result of sort of giving up hope and kind of just going along with whatever life brought to me,
Mm-hmm.
not feeling like I was in control. Once I was a little older and in high school and as a teen and that I felt I was losing hope. But as a kid, I believe that I was trying to picture a better future for me where I was in control and
Mm-hmm.
I could do what I wanted and, um, not, yeah, that changed when I was a teen and I realized that, it's not as easy as just going out there and,
Yes, life sucks for you, love it. This is the
hmm
statement that I keep using for my son.
yeah,
Becoming a mother with 17, it's a huge responsibility.
yeah,
I became a father with over 30, and I still think I was too not ripe enough. So let me
right.
put it this way. Um, what has that done emotionally to you? Did it help somehow, or just brought more burden on you?
I think that it really helped because it gave me a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And just like most parents will say, when you first saw your newborn child, you fall in love in a way that you've never felt before or never knew existed, really. And so that happened to me, even as 17, as a mom. Um, I also, felt like not only that I had a purpose, but it gave me something to work towards. Like I wanted to be a better person for my son. And I think that had I not had him, I probably would have gotten into, with a bad crowd, or hung around people that were, maybe partying a lot and, drinking and stuff like that. I might have gotten into more of that kind of a crowd that was just not good, not a good crowd. But
Mm-hmm.
because of my son, I, kind of was able to be more, more of a mom and more adult, I guess. It helped me to grow up. I did have the help of my mother, so I do want to give her that credit for being so
Oh,
supportive and
that's interesting.
yeah. Yeah, and by that time in my life too, so right about 16 or 17 or so, my mother started, so after my sister was killed in a car accident, I was just before I turned 14, and then we lived in one place, behind a store. It was a terrible place. And then the following year, my uncle, my mother's brother, had a big house and his wife and he were divorcing. So he asked my mother if she wanted to move in with us and help him to keep the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so we lived in a nicer neighborhood. my mother didn't have such a burden with with the rent and apartments and stuff. And she had a real job that she had had for a while and it was starting to pay good. So at that time in my life, things were starting to get better as far as, we weren't hungry. I had things that I needed. And, you know, when I became pregnant, it was, I didn't know how she would react, but, and I'm the baby of the family too. Like all my cousins, my sisters were older. I'm the baby and I was the first one to have a baby. But, so it was a big surprise to everybody. But,
The
but at that
statement,
point,
sorry for interrupting,
it's
but
okay.
the stupid statement in Romania was you have to have them young because you grow with them.
Oh, I did grow up with my
Yeah,
son for sure, for sure. I mean, we are like this today. We are
for
so
sure.
close, and it's almost like a brother-sister relationship, except, I always feel motherly towards him. Like he just turned 41, took him out to eat, and gave him presents and stuff. We went to eat and I gave him some vitamins. It's like, it's like, I know you're eating. Here's some vitamins. I'm sorry, I can't help it. I'm always going to be your mother. So, and I can laugh at myself about that, but yeah,
Um,
I would never wish that he wasn't born or anything.
I just want to say I'm 41 as well.
Yeah, okay,
Uh,
okay. I saw your lips moving. I didn't know what you were trying to say. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
the best year ever, 84. Um,
Yep, 84.
um, coming back to what you were saying before, so I think it's nice, like you bond in a nice way, but this is my opinion, unqualified, unprofessional opinion, but I think it had to do with the fact that you wanted to give him what you didn't have. You wanted to give him someone to be close to, someone to have a good connection with, and I think
Yeah.
that's the reason why you have such a good connection.
Yeah.
Again, unprofessional, not an expert, but just my feeling. Um,
Yeah.
but Pamela, I have a curiosity. Why do you think the because I have seen this in multiple cases where the parents were not parents, or were not taking care of the kids while they were parents, but then when they became
Hmm.
grandparents, sorry,
Right.
they have I waken up. Why do you think is that is happening?
I think part of it is maturity. Not all of it and not always, but a part of it, when people have children, sometimes they're not ready to have children and they have maybe a little bit of a resentment or they're not ready to be that responsible. And then once they have the grandkids, almost making up for that, maybe
Yeah.
if they didn't feel like they were good parents or there's not a good relationship with their own children, then they almost, maybe not even consciously, maybe even just subconsciously, they want to sort of reparent their own kids through being there for their grandkids. Maybe. I don't know.
Mm. Just an assumption, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, You mentioned losing your sister with 14, Pamela. I think
Yeah.
besides all the other emotional um, traumas that you had, there was also something coming on top of everything. How did you handle that grief?
It was really, I was numb. I didn't speak. I think I was in shock for a few days. Um, I have a book and I wrote about it in the book and I can remember details and things that happened during like the steps of it, like when we found out what other people were doing, having to view her body with my other sister because my mother didn't want to. You would think my father would have stepped in, but he didn't. So my sister and I, before the casket or was closed, somebody had to view her. That was the law, I guess. A family member had to put eyes on the
Identify
person,
to
identify
identify
the
to a
body.
body.
That's what they
Yeah.
say. Yeah, yeah. So, my sister and I did that. And so it was it's surreal almost to think about it, and so much family and so many people and adults and people that came and, almost everybody was crying, of course, but I was numb and I was just sort of going through the motions. I wasn't sure, I didn't get any guidance and I didn't know how I was supposed to, I didn't have anybody talk to me about it, you know? Um, I didn't know how I was supposed to respond, what I was supposed to do. I felt lost, like I had, my whole childhood up to that point. I had felt kind of lost. Um, yeah, and one thing, when my sister was in the hospital, she had already passed away, but my mother's friend drove us there, and she said to me, we were sitting like in a waiting area, and my mother was away over by the nurses or whatever. But the my mother's friend said to me, she pointed right at me and she said, "You be strong for your mother. Don't you cry. You have to be strong for your mother." And it was just like 2 days away from my 14th birthday. So I was 13. Yeah, crazy. The worst thing she could have said. To this day, I have trouble expressing emotions, or, if I feel myself crying, it's just like, automatic shut off. I can't do that, And I know that's, even though I know where it came from, I still have trouble letting myself go, even in appropriate times and stuff. So that's a deep rooted issue right there. Yeah.
This is so bad. This is so
Yeah.
bad. Whomever has done that, whomever wants to do this, to never,
Right.
ever, ever, ever do that to a child.
Yeah.
Never.
And that was 1980. So, yeah. So,
Nobody knew anything about mental health back then.
right, right. That's my point. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
involving children in, or even realizing children can have trauma. Like you said, if they weren't physically abused or growing up with an alcoholic parent or something like that, something really out there up in front and center, then we don't really, or they didn't usually think that children were going through trauma.
If it's not obvious, it's not happening.
Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
sounds bad, but this is it. So
Hmm.
nobody. Again, coming from an Eastern European country, I can tell you one thing: we still don't believe in depression. We still don't believe that
Hmm.
something like this exists. We still don't believe that trauma exists. No, just buckle up and go. Move. No,
Yeah,
that doesn't
wow.
exist. Yeah, and we are 30 years behind the dictatorship, and still it will take another 30. I think it will,
Yeah,
until it will be socially accepted that burnout exists, that trauma exists, that depression exists, that stuff like this exists.
yeah,
I think it's a hard change. I want to say one thing regarding the family, Pamela, because it's impressive for me. Being a father now, it's impressive for me when you say that he wasn't there, like he was never there. Did you ever
yeah.
had contact with him?
Off and on, like not even, I won't even say once a year, like every once in a great while, he would take us or take me like to eat or something, but I never like had a weekend with him. Or, a couple of my birthdays, he would take me like to the zoo or something like that, or to eat. But, I didn't even see him every year that they were divorced. So not much contact with him.
The being a child, I've seen a Romanian movie, and I hope that the name doesn't even matter. But there was a saying there that I didn't understood back then, and now it makes more and more sense. And there was a fight between a family, a wife and a husband, and she was telling him, "If you move your ass 2 times, that doesn't make you a father."
Right.
Uh, and as harsh as it sounds, I think it's something that must be said.
Yeah.
The being qualified as a father, it takes you more than that. So
Yeah.
hard, tough, especially in those times, especially in those situations, like you said, when your mother didn't want to identify your sister, then he should.
Yeah.
It's even painful to say it. um Pamela, you became a mother with 17, and I think that's a trauma by itself. um
Yeah. I
I,
don't ever think of that as trauma or as part of a traumatic experience, but and at the time I loved it, and I think he was 3 or 4 years old, and I was a live-in nanny with two infants and him, and I was still so young, and I think of that time as like I loved that time. So, um, it doesn't feel like it was traumatic, but I understand what you're saying. It was a lot of responsibility for somebody who was a child, Who especially
already had
didn't even have a childhood.
exactly, and who already had a huge responsibility taking care of the mother, having the emotional uh, background that you had, and I think that's why, of course, the being a mother has also an I would call it a happy side effect,
Hmm.
right? And that's that happy side effect. Luckily, it's so much. It's coming with so much love.
Yeah.
That that it's covering all the bad things. That's the huge
Yeah.
advantage of it.
Yeah.
Um, was that also so? The father of your first child is also your first husband?
No.
No.
No, I didn't know my first husband when I had my first child. So the father was not really in the picture. He was same age as me. We were children. While I was pregnant, he started dating other people and stuff. So he wasn't really a part of his life either. Yeah.
That's a hard statement, but
Yeah.
we have to be aware of something, and I'm saying this quite often. I think we are 5 years back in developing our mind.
Mm,
Besides woman, this is my feeling, and I have the feeling that it's always like a 3 4 years of a difference in maturity between
yeah.
a woman and a man, and I think that says a lot. If you are the same age, he was still a kid
Yeah.
playing video
He was
games,
a
most
child
probably.
as well. Well,
Exactly.
there weren't even video games back then,
I
but
know. I was just joking. I
yeah.
try. I try to make a joke.
Yeah. But if it was today, he'd be playing video games.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And how did you met your? What led you into your first marriage? Then let me take us through
So
that story.
yeah, so I was started dating. I had wanted to have another child, not only for me, but for my son. He was getting a little bit older, and I wanted him to have siblings. And I probably could have done that without getting married, but in my mind, I had to be married to do that. And so I started dating only people that had like real careers and not just a job like at the grocery store or whatever, or the car wash or whatever. So I started like almost looking for a husband. My first husband was somebody that was a neighbor of a good friend of mine. And my friend she was a few years older than me, and she had a son that was around my son's age. And so we would go there, and the boys would play together, and her and I would visit. And so it was her neighbor. And so he just, started hanging around when I was there, and that's how we started dating.
Have you seen the signs from the beginning of the relationship, or it took you a while to see the signs?
Well, I think he really changed, honestly. He was very much like other than, he had a career, he was very responsible, he had his own apartment. A lot of the boys around that time, around my age, didn't have those things, were not that responsible, or mature, as we were talking about. So, he was very much kind of like, even though he had all that stuff, he was kind of a hippie, like, very,
Mm-hmm.
um, free going, whatever, and easygoing and calm and, you know, polite and whatever. Um, but once we married, so he was from a different part of he was from Upper Michigan, and so after we married, we moved there right away, and he went to school for corrections officer, and then he started becoming really controlling in the relationship, and not only controlling, but even like gaslighting, like, saying one thing that's totally different that doesn't even sound like it would come from him, and then later saying that I was crazy, he never said that. Um, so you start to question yourself, if your sanity and stuff. And that's what real gaslighting is. It's kind of like a buzzword or like something people use a lot nowadays, but that's what it
Mm-hmm.
really is. Um, so he started acting in that way, um, and he started drinking a lot once he had that job too. And so that of course got worse. So he was abusive in a way that was controlling, um, you know, putting me down all the time, contradicting things, you know, And just anything that I said, he had something to say about it that was negative. Anything that I wanted to do or anything that I had an interest in, or even friends that I started making, or, you know, that's when I went to nursing school. We had been married for 15 years, so I was in that marriage for a long time. But he had changed, so I don't feel like there were real red flags to see in the beginning. Unlike the second marriage, but with that first one that I was married for 15 years, and he's the father of my second child, my daughter. And so I think he changed pretty quickly after the first year or two at most.
So it started only as a verbal abuse, or it was only verbal abuse in the
It
first
was
case?
only verbal and emotional abuse. He never laid a
Okay.
hand on me. He was not a violent person.
Mm-hmm.
He still sort of kept that sort of calm demeanor on the outside anyway. I
Mm-hmm.
think he was a very nervous person inside. That sort of analogy of like the duck and the stream, and they just seem so calm and peaceful, but underneath they're like paddling like crazy. I think that's what he was doing, within him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he never became physically abusive.
Most probably also coming from a control freak household, most probably also inheriting, taking with him a lot of trauma that he was not aware of.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, his father wasn't around for him either. And he grew up in a single mother household, although he didn't have the same issues that I did. His mother and his aunt ran a business together, so they had pretty steady income and pretty steady childhood. They, didn't move around a lot. They had enough to eat, and he had, an older sister and a younger sister, and they were, a closer family.
Mm-hmm.
So, but not having a father and being the only boy, that had to have some effect on him. And,
Responsibility.
yeah, and like I said, he was an alcoholic, or he became an alcoholic, and I don't know if his father drank. His mother definitely didn't. I don't know if his father drank, or, I don't know where that came from. If it was just his friends and the just stressful job and what, I don't know.
Usually, usually boys tend to do whatever they have seen at home, and
Yeah,
even though you don't know, most probably it happened,
right.
because we tend to copy the behavior of our parents. So the parents are more like a role model for us that we can imagine.
Yeah.
How did the second marriage differ from the first one?
So I laugh because it's just so crazy, unbelievable, but it's,
It's unbelievable that you can do that, Pamela.
yeah, yeah.
I have to say that over and over
I
again.
have grown and healed so much. Yeah, yeah, it is. It is unbelievable that I can laugh about it now. But I say, and if you've listened to some of my, other interviews and stuff, you've probably heard me say that I jumped out of the frying pan and into the fire, but that's the perfect way to describe it. I think that, so my second husband was somebody that I knew as a teen. He was the friend of my son's father, but he was more interested in, he would call me and say, "How did your doctor appointment go? How is the baby doing?" He was very much there for me and a very good friend at that time. We dated a little bit, but not too much, really. It was more of a good friendship, and he seemed to care about me and care about the baby. And so he was a good person back then. And so we reconnected. I hadn't spoke to him in over 20 years, probably closer to 30 years or something at that point. And we got married really quickly, and I didn't know really the person that he was now, or then. And I thought I was his third wife, and I ended up being his sixth wife. I found that out in in the divorce. I found that out.
And
Um,
that with what age?
I think I was in my mid to late 40s, and so he's my same age. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
5 till 40, it's an
Yeah.
accomplishment. We'll call it like this.
Yeah. So So when I went to the divorce, and I know we're jumping ahead a little, we can get back if
No,
we want, but when I
yeah.
went to the divorce lawyer, um, he had said, I had given him the big rundown of everything, and he said, "How many times did what number wife were you?" And I said, "I was the third wife," and even that I had reservations about marrying him that I would be the third wife. I mean, obviously we married quickly, like I said, too quickly, but then that was the divorce lawyer that said he was married 5 times before you, not three, not two, five. So, yeah. So first lie.
I have to make a joke here, and I'm sorry for this, but I do remember a funny story. I don't know if you know the TV series Friends.
A little
Uh,
bit. It was never something that I watched much, but yeah, I know about it.
you know about it, and there is a character there, Ross, who got divorced 3 times, and the lawyer
Mm.
told him, if I knew that, I could have get a discount, 2 for 1 free or something.
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
I'm sorry for that.
No, that's okay. Yeah. People will relate with that. I'm sure if you
Yeah.
were thinking it, others were too. Yeah.
So you're his sixth wife. You never had contact with any of the previous ones? You
No, I don't
didn't
even.
even knew them.
His first wife was a young lady that I knew as a teen. She went to high school with me, but I wasn't friends with her, but I knew who she was. And I
Okay.
knew that that was his first wife because he had a child with her as well.
Okay.
And I knew that. I didn't know any of the other wives.
What were the early signs, Pamela?
So the early signs is, anytime I was on the phone or anytime that I was, went somewhere for my daughter. She was in gymnastics. I can remember going to one of her gymnastics meets um and this is I think before we were married or maybe in, at least the first year, if not before. But he would be texting all the time and he would be so suspicious and just, always accuse me of cheating or being somewhere different than where I said I was, or, just always very, controlling and suspicious of anything I did that what didn't involve him. Um, but it was like I could not, I remember that one of those first things was at one of my daughter's gymnastics meets, and he was texting me like crazy, accusing me of all, being somewhere else. Who are you with? And he knew where I was going, and I think he was invited, but he didn't want to go. So, I mean, so yeah, that was like one of the early things. Um, I knew that he definitely had childhood trauma. He had lots of childhood abuse and the type that you can see that people know as abuse. And I really felt like, people will say, oh, which is kind of happens often, but people feel like they can save the other person or help the other person. It wasn't so much that I felt that I could save him or help him. It was I felt like once he was able to get the help that he needed, once he was able to get into a program or get some therapy or get the right medications mixed with therapy, that he would be okay and he would be better. Um, so that was my thinking, and I was a nurse. I had just started nursing the same year that I had married him, and so I felt like with, having a good job like that could support us, that he wouldn't have to worry about working and he could work on himself and help himself to heal. And that was my thinking, but he really, he didn't take advantage of that. He didn't do well with all of that. So.
You really had the thought of the family in there to keep your family together, and that's really nice. Was he also drinking?
Yeah, yeah, he was drinking, and I didn't find out till later, but then there were drugs involved as well. And when he got medications, he took them incorrectly, like took more than he was supposed to, or mixed them with other things, or stuff like that, or mixed them with alcohol and that. And he was in and out of recovery centers and mental health centers and stuff like that. And all of that was so hard to deal with. One of the reasons that I married him, like I said, I thought that our life together would help him to heal. And I felt like he was a really good person on the inside because of what he was when we were younger. But it was like I was still up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and I still wasn't living, around my own family and my friends from childhood and that. And he was familiar, and I, like to say, I have said it often that I had mistaken familiarity for love, and I felt like, oh, good, this is somebody that knows me, that really knows me. This is somebody from my past that is here now, because I felt, you know, in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, it's kind of a smallish community. Um, Everybody knew my ex-husband, and we were married for 15 years, and um, everybody knew him, and it just felt like I was almost embarrassed to go anywhere or to be there. I didn't feel like I belonged, and meeting back up with him sort of felt more like home.
You are searching for comfort and you found
Mm-hmm.
comfort because you knew him, and how you mix
Yeah,
up the feeling, that's also something completely understandable because you are searching for comfort and you cannot really make the big difference between
right.
comfort and love. Um, what I'm sorry to have sorry, I'm sorry to have to ask you this, but what are some of the daily realities? So besides the constant checking, the control freakness, I would just call it like this. Um, but what were the daily realities of living in the abusive household?
Well, I was really, like the saying goes, walking on eggshells. And that was the same with my first husband. But I was also talking in with eggshells. Like I had to
I'm
be,
getting angry. I'm sorry. I'm getting I'm
yeah,
sorry for
yeah,
interrupting you.
yeah. Yeah, I felt like anything I said, I had to sort of put through extra filters to make sure it wasn't going to come off wrong, or to make sure he wasn't going to take it in a way that, whatever he would think something different. So it was very much controlled. But, the longer I was married to him for 8 years, so after a few years in, and he was drinking a lot, so I would come home, because like I said, I was the one working mostly. He was a truck driver, and he was working off and on here and there. Um, but being a nurse, I was able to get a job anywhere, and so I always had a job while we were married. But so I would come home, and I would never know what I was coming home to. Sometimes he would be passed out drunk. Sometimes he would be just, watching TV, listening to music like a normal, quote unquote, normal person. And other times he would be like almost, I don't like to use the word crazy, but just, somebody that you didn't recognize. He was saying things that didn't make sense. He was doing things that didn't make sense. Sometimes he was violent, and he would push me around and get up right in my face and throw furniture around and stuff like that. Or he would be, one time, and I think I've said this in other places, but, one time I came home and the refrigerator door was open, and he was laying on the floor in front of it. um, I had no idea how long he had been there. And, you think, is he alive? And you walk in and you see him like that, and you've seen him passed out before, you've seen him violent before, you've seen him belligerent before, and you just roll your eyes and go in the other room, and you know what I mean? It's like maybe he's dead. I don't know, but I'm just gonna take a shower and change my clothes from work and stuff, and then I'll go deal with that. So it wasn't even like, oh my gosh, an emergency. It was like, oh, jeez. So yeah, that was difficult.
And being also the only person in the family working is making it even worse because if he's suspicious anyhow, staying at home all the time, you have
Yeah,
nothing to do except being suspicious. Nothing. Like you
yeah, it just grows. Yeah.
exactly, and that makes it even worse. What made it difficult to leave the relationship, Pamela?
So he was not, he was getting worse. He wasn't getting any better. And anytime he went to these facilities and these treatment centers and whatever, I didn't find out till later that he was self-sabotaging all of his treatment and that. But it was hard to leave because I felt like, I felt like I don't know if I want to say like I felt like I failed, but I felt like, I was leaving somebody at a very difficult time in their life, and I didn't want to, sort of kick him when he's down. But I had to come to a realization that, he is making that choice. He has all the tools that he needs, and he is making that choice to not go through a healing process, and to know that, you can only do so much, but you can't do it for somebody, and my own mental health was declining, trying to help him with his mental health. And when I realized that, so he was away when I decided to divorce, is he was away at one of his recovery centers, and he was going to end up having to stay longer than originally thought. And they asked me to bring him some clothes. So I went into his closet and I found some bottles of some alcohol. And so then I started searching around other places in the house and found him hidden everywhere. And that's when I really realized that he was self-sabotaging his own wellness and that I cared more about and was working towards his wellness more than he was. So when he got back from that, I told him, I cannot live like this. I realize you do not want a normal, simple, productive life, that you live in chaos and you need that, and you're hurting yourself, more than trying to help yourself. So I can't live like that. So I'm divorcing. But I told him that I will wait, and this is my big mistake. I said, I will wait until you get yourself on your feet so that you won't be homeless, you know, um, just get yourself a job, get on your feet, get a place to stay. Even if you go back to your mother or something, find a place to stay so that I'm not leaving you out on the street, whatever. And that was, like I said, that was a big mistake because he had nothing to lose and he started drinking more and he didn't care about how he looked to me anymore. So he was more open with all of his drinking and all of his medication, not taking it correctly and stuff. And so so then one night I came home from work and he was in one of those moods of throwing furniture around. He was yelling at me. I had went into another room, not the bedroom, but another room, and closed the door and just was telling him over and over, leave me alone, just leave me alone, just leave me alone. And he came in and he ended up, so it was like all night, back and forth. I texted one of his friends, come get your drunk friend, I said. And he said, don't call the police on him because he'll lose his CDL. That's the commercial driver's license. He said, his friend said, don't call the police on him. So I listened. So for a while, I wasn't because I wanted him to get on his feet. But then he ended up, so, throughout the course of the night, it ended up with me unconscious on the floor of the closet because I went into the closet to get out of the way of him throwing the furniture around and stuff. And when I came to, I called the police. I called the police because he wouldn't let me leave because I also was trying to get out and he took the keys. He wouldn't let me leave, blocked the door. And so I did. I called the police and I got out. And then I stayed on a friend's couch for 2 nights. And since I knew I was divorcing, I was already looking for places. So luckily I had a place pretty quickly. And it was a place that he didn't know where I was, even though I was right in the same town. I was probably a mile or two away from where we had lived, but I was still working in the same place at that time. So I wasn't too far, but it was in a place that he didn't know where I was. And I was very, very fearful. That's when I had my major breakdown, was at that time.
Two things besides the guilt that you had, because I think we can qualify it as a guilt of
Mm-hmm.
leaving him and getting homeless and stuff like this. Did you ever had the fear did you ever had did you ever felt that shame played a role in you not leaving him?
I think that I was ashamed for sure. I was ashamed that I got into such a bad situation so quickly. I was ashamed that, I couldn't, not that I couldn't help him, but I was ashamed that I couldn't, help guide him to his wellness, help him
Okay.
through that. Um, and it took my children at that time when I was married to him, especially in the second part as it was getting worse and worse. My children and I did not have good relationships at that time, and it's a good thing, but it was mostly his fault, and I don't blame people, but it was mostly because of the relationship with him that they didn't want to be around it. And I understand that, and I'm glad that they didn't want to, in
Mm,
hindsight, because I have a good relationship with my children now, and we've talked about this, but they don't know everything and they don't want to know everything. And so I respect that. So any of these podcasts that I'm on and that they don't listen to it because they don't want to hear it, of course. And I understand that my son, like you, and who's your same age, right? He gets angry and he kind of knows, but he doesn't know it all. But yeah, he has a protective, nature over his mother, and he gets mad about it to hear
yeah.
about
y-
anything. Yeah.
it's really now I realize it's a really funny coincidence because my mother was also 17 when she had me.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Wow.
it's a really funny coincidence. Hi, mom. She's watching this all the
Oh,
time.
hi, Mom.
um, you said you mentioned I have the first question, and before we go forward in the story, if you could speak to someone who's going through the same I would say who's also trapped in this kind of a relationship, what would you tell them?
I would tell them, don't wait. It's not going to get better. There's nothing that you can do differently to make them realize that they need to heal, or realize that they need to get help. Don't stay hoping that it'll get better ever, you know. Get out as soon as there's any trouble. It doesn't even have to be anything physical. It doesn't have to be, even just talking down to you, but just, you will get that feeling and you'll know, oh, you'll get that dread feeling of like, oh my gosh, this is not normal. This is not good. This is not the life that I want. This is
Uh,
not a life that I know is good and healthy for me. As soon as you get that feeling, you could see a therapist, see a counselor, see a lawyer, you but talk to friends, family. I wasn't talking to people at that time either because I was, like you said, a little bit of ashamed that I entered into this marriage so quickly and it turned into be such a terrible thing. So I was a little ashamed of it, but thinking back, I should have been open with my friends and my family and talked about what was going on for real, what was really going on. And I'm sure I would have gotten some good advice if I did that. So, and taken me out of that feeling of, um, you know, he might get better. All he needs is the right therapist. All he needs is the right combination of medication. All he needs is whatever. But, that wasn't happening. And I feel like, looking back too, I gave it a good amount of time. It wasn't like I left in the first year. But, as soon as you realize, no matter what you have told people or said about it or told yourself about it, as soon as you realize it's not healthy for you, leave. Find a way out. And it's easier said than done. I know I was lucky I had a good job and not everybody's in that space. But, if you talk openly and candidly to your friends and your family, it'll be a big help. So that's huge.
Leave the shame away.
Hmm.
Leaving the shame away is critical. Nobody's talking about no people that are really close to you. They will not care about you.
Right.
being ashamed or something. They will not consider that. They will try to help you, and if they are not
Yeah.
trying to help you, then they are not the right persons to talk to, and you should choose someone else.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Yeah, if
it's
they want to make you feel shame, or if they're going to put you down about it, those are not your loved ones, even if they're family, but whether you feel like you do or not, you do have loved ones. You do have people that care and love
absolutely,
you, even if
absolutely,
you don't feel like you do, you do.
and you just have to find them.
Yeah.
You mentioned about hitting rock bottom, Pamela, and from then on the road to the bus ride. Take us a bit through that story.
Yeah, so like I said, I left and I knew, it was that night, so it wasn't a big plan. It was that night that I ended up, unconscious on the floor of the closet. That night that I called the police on him and they didn't take him away. I called them and I said, I want to leave. If you could be here while I leave, the police stood by at the house with him while I left. So so I left and I felt like, oh, good, everything will be great now. And as soon as I left, then I started the process of the divorce and went through all of that. And I was still working at that same place, but I started getting really fearful, really anxious, really depressed. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. It just like smacked me like I ran into a wall. I had no idea why this was happening. I felt like everything should be great now. I'm on my own. I don't have, an abusive or toxic relationship. It's just me. I still have this good job. I'm living somewhere on my own. Everything will be great. But it was not. And like I said, I ended up being so fearful, so depressed. I became suicidal and I realized, part of the problem with the anxiety, or I thought anyway, because when I went to work, it was the only place that he knew where I was, and he knew the schedule I worked and everything. So I quit that job, and then I had a series of other jobs because I was finding myself unable to really have that kind of responsibility or take care of others. Because, like I said, I was a nurse. I had trouble dealing with it all and sort of broke down and just, crashed. And I could barely take care of myself, for a while. And a friend of mine said, who was going through the same thing almost, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, had a bad divorce, said, hey, I might be going to California to have a fresh start. Maybe you want to do that too. It's a good idea, maybe if you want to go. And um, so I said to my landlord, I said, well, maybe, I had never thought about it before. And I said to my landlord, because I'd have to be breaking the lease or leaving early or something. So I said, you know, um, I might be I might be moving out of state. I just wanted to give you a heads up. I'm not sure right now, but I just wanted to give you a heads up and let you know. And they said to me, um, can you be out in 2 weeks? We were thinking of selling the house anyway, because it was just a small little house, like a 1 or 2 bedroom house and very small, that I was renting. And they said, yeah, we thought we would sell the house anyway. Can you be out in 2 weeks? So So I figured it out. I found a way to get there. I got a bus ticket. I got rid of almost everything and I got a bus ticket. And at this point, I think I was just 50 years old. And I went on the bus 3 days, 3-day ride from Missouri to California. I was in Missouri at that point and came to California alone on a bus, 50 years old, totally numb, out of my mind. And and you probably heard this funny story that I tell. It's kind of funny, kind of, just another thing in the whole story of tragedy. But this person sits next to me who looked disheveled, looked kind of like a homeless person, and they're just talking at me a lot, and I was very numb. I just was that's the best way to describe it. I was just numb on that bus. And so I did. being polite, but I wasn't engaging in conversation with them, but just being polite and nodding and whatever. And then so this guy was drinking water. He had a water bottle, and then he spilled it on my seat. And I stood up really quick, and you could tell right away as soon as he spilled it, and it was all over my seat, that it was alcohol. It wasn't water. And when I stood up, he started trying to wipe off my bottom, the seat of my jeans, with his hand, or I don't know if he had a bandana, but I was like, don't, stop. And so he wiped off the seat and I sat back down, but luckily we were coming to a rest stop. And we weren't supposed to get our bags from underneath the bus. There's for people who don't know, there's a space for storage where underneath the bus, where when you first get on, that's where they put all the luggage and any bags and anything that you don't want to have on the bus with you. So I had my suitcase there. They said once you put it under here, you don't get it until your final destination. So I was not at my final destination. And so I told the bus driver what happened. And so I was able to get some clothes. I went into the rest stop and changed my clothes, and I threw those jeans away. I didn't even bring them with me. And he was kicked off the bus, luckily. And that felt almost like just one little step of empowerment for me. It's like I stood up for myself. You know, I told them what happened. I mean, I had to because I had to change, but yeah, I kind of stood up for myself a little bit. I wasn't gonna, take that or be on this bus with this person, any
Do you
longer
see
either.
that as the beginning of hope?
I wouldn't say it was the beginning of hope. It was the beginning of realizing that I could stand up for myself. And I think maybe calling the police with my second husband, that should have been the time. And maybe that was part of it. That was a tiny little step in standing up for myself. Leaving my first husband was a tiny step in standing up for myself. Um, but that was another one.
How did it feel to leave everything behind, Pamela?
That felt like hope. It was like, oh, I've got something to look forward to, somewhere to go, something to do. Maybe, hopefully, it'll be a fresh start, as my friend had mentioned. So that ride, getting on the bus was like, okay, here's another chance. Like you said, like I have said, it was a last ditch effort because like I said, I was suicidal. When I had left. And the only reason that I didn't carry out those plans is because my mother had lost a daughter already, and I didn't want her to lose another one. So that's what kept me from doing that. Um, I've said it before, but I know a lot of people talk about their children, and they say because of my children is why I hung on to that hope and didn't unalive myself. But for me, my kids were adults already, and I felt like they would be better off without me. Like, what's going on with mom? And, having to worry about me or being concerned with, like I said, we didn't have the best relationship at that time when I was at the second part of with my second husband. So I didn't think that my kids would mind, which is terrible to think of now, but I didn't do that because of my mother. So that was like the last ditch effort. Like, okay, I'm going to try to have a fresh start, go somewhere else where I know, it's very far from anywhere he is. And I thought that that was the problem. I thought I was just scared of him finding me.
Hmm.
And, so I was hoping that just being in a different state would help. Um, so yeah, I still had my nursing, even though I mean, I still had that license, and even though, I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue nursing, but that was like something that I knew I still had that I could get a job with, if I wanted to or needed to. I kind of had that in my toolbox.
Absolutely. That's a huge advantage.
Yeah,
You start from zero, but you don't start from zero financially, let's say it like this.
yeah, yeah.
How are the first days when you arrived in California?
So I have written two books. One is all about the whole life of trauma and then healing. The second one is about the nursing career and leaving. So I'm writing a third book about just this. I got myself into a bad situation with somebody who was trying to take advantage of a vulnerable woman. But so I know I just keep
You you
falling into
you
these.
checked them all. Like
Yeah.
you checked them
Yeah.
all.
So that's my third book. But so I when before I came, I was looking for before I decided to go ahead and buy that ticket to come to California, I was looking for jobs that I could have a place to live and work at the same spot. So I didn't, because I knew California was more expensive. That's what we've always heard. So and you couldn't go right into nursing because whenever you move state in the US anyway, you have to reapply at the Board of Nursing to get your license for that state. So it's a big process. But I was not in the headspace to be able to even do that. So I was looking for jobs like live in caregiver, live-in house sitter, pet sitter, caregiver, those kinds of things. So there was this man that had his own business, worked out of his home, and he had an extra room. And he's like, you can stay here and work for me, and so that was what I thought I was getting into, but it was a total trap. So so that was not good. Still very fearful, walking and talking on eggshells, and just trying to find a way out. Like from the first couple days there, I was trying to find a way out. And so I found another job within a facility that was like a residential facility for elderly people that I could go and I could have a room there because they had live-in care as well as people that came and went. And so that was a little more it wasn't just somebody's house.
Hmm.
So I went and did that within 3 weeks of arriving in California and finding out that the first place I went wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I was able to get out and do that. So that was good.
So you didn't thought about applying for the nurse um, reauthorization in California at the beginning.
Right.
Did you do it eventually?
Yeah, yeah, I did. And I wasn't even sure when I came to California. I wasn't positive I was going to stay here. So that was another thing. Um, and like I said, I knew that I still needed to heal. I knew I was still in a bad mental state. Um, I was still depressed. I was still anxious. I wasn't sleeping. And I knew that I couldn't really do that type of job right away. So I had eventually went to like I said, I went to the doctor and the first thing is I thought that I needed like medicine to help me sleep because I was mostly anxious at night and then my day was ruined.
Hmm.
Um, or when I was trying to work with people, I was just so exhausted. And I ended up doing then pet sitting, live in house and pet sitting. So, so that was good where I didn't have to like get up and help the elderly, like I could take care of pets and live with them. And that was really nice. And so that's at the point that I went to the doctor and he told me to go get therapy. So after a year of therapy is when I was like, okay,
Hmm.
I would like to be more independent. I would like to get my own place, and nursing is the way to do that. So, after a year of therapy and doing these house and pet sitting types of jobs, um, that's when I decided to go ahead and go back to nursing.
Hmm.
So I went through that huge process of applying for and everything that you need to do to switch the license from one state to another.
Can you pinpoint the moment when you said this was the right choice?
Yeah, yeah, I actually can. So when I was in therapy, there was about the third session, I think, that I started to see things differently. I started to connect the dots of what happened, that my childhood had so much play into what continued to happen in my adulthood. And it all started to make sense. And then realizing, like I said, I was starting to think differently and see things from a different perspective. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get better. This is, like I could start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I was just amazed. It was like, the angels and the light came down. It's like, yay. It was that strong for me. And yeah, it was like about the third session with the therapist. Now, I had worked with a therapist for a year or maybe even a year and a half, but it was early on. I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be okay. I'm gonna be okay.
What was the most important thing that you learned about yourself during therapy, Pamela?
The most important thing that I learned about myself in therapy is that I matter. That I never felt like, that I really had a place in this world for me, what I want to do, what I think, what I believe, my own life is my own life and I matter. I know that seems so sad to kind of say that, but, I didn't learn that until I was, in my 50s.
I do appreciate your honesty a lot.
Yeah.
That's not easy to say it out loud. That's it's impressive, I must say.
I think it's important to, help other people that are
Absolutely.
going through these kinds of things and feeling this way to be like, oh my gosh, I can relate with that. That's how I feel. Or even that's how I felt, and they can relate with it and they know that they're not alone. And then too, that they know it's okay to talk about it. It can be even healing. I think every time that I tell any part of the story, I think it's still healing in a way, a part of me.
You arrived in California, and you were without the social network of support that you had back home, and you started building it. I do guess.
Yeah.
And the do you remember someone that that was special in that process while you were healing?
Um, well, the last house that I lived in and did pet and house sitting for, it was with another woman, and she had just lost her mother, and I had helped her with her mother's home, packing up things and helping her with her pets and her plants and helping her to find a new home. And like we went through a lot of this stuff together. And she had had an alcoholic ex and stuff too. So we built a real good friendship there, and she was very um patient with me, as far as, if I needed to stay in my room all day, she wasn't trying to get me to do anything, she encouraged me to go to the doctor and to go to therapy. And she let me use her car. I didn't have a car at that time. So I think she was very helpful just in having patience and being a friend and somebody that, that was probably my first real friend here. And for some reason I felt safe with her and I felt like I could trust her and I hadn't had that, especially where I was living, if ever, maybe. So yeah.
It's really nice when we meet this kind of people on the way,
Yeah.
because you always have the feeling that after 30 you will never buid a new friendship, and
Mm.
because that's the feeling that you have. You think, yeah, everything's done with 20. In the 20s you have the
Yeah.
time and stuff like this, but then you realize you build more friendship and more reliable friendships, um,
Yeah.
in your 30s, in your 40s, in your 50s as well, like you were just
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
How did you build a sense of home from scratch, Pamela? Because the sense of home is something which you left behind.
Well, I don't feel like I ever had a sense of home. And I feel like, just learning. So I am married for the third time, and this relationship is completely different than the others. And this is, for the first time, I feel truly loved and respected. And there's, it's an equal relationship. And I never had that before either. So I feel like a sense of home is more of what's inside of you. It's not necessarily your surroundings or where you are. It's feeling comfortable and feeling at peace within yourself. And I finally feel that, and I don't think I've ever felt that before.
I usually ask the expats that I have invited in my podcast if home is a place or a feeling, and most of
Mm,
the people are saying that's a feeling. It's not a
yeah,
place.
yeah.
Um, and coming back to the initial, no, I have to say something before we move on. I, I think the piece of story we are not even we're close to the end, but I really have to say something which is kind of a like a conclusion. Let's say it. I would say like this. I think you this the last thing that you just said, Pamela, that you feel love, you feel that you are appreciated for who you are. Um, should give hope to everyone going through the trauma that you went through, going through the r- abusive relationships that you went through, being alone as well,
Yeah,
and just everyone should be able to understand there is hope. You just have to try, you have to search for it, you have to fight for it. Nothing is coming easy. You have to
yeah,
choose your heart. Your heart can be that you stay there in the abusive relationship. The heart can be that you stay alone because you don't want to see anyone else. Or the heart
right.
can be that you fight to find the right person. And I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and therapy, if you have been in any kind of toxic relationship, it doesn't even have to be really that, abusive on a major level, but if so many people say, I've given up on trying to date or I've been given up on love
Mm-hmm.
or, and I even felt that way, honestly. But it was only after therapy that I could have been in the relationship that I'm in now. I fully believe that I would not have, I would not have this relationship had I not been through therapy. So I think that's really important. And it doesn't have to be psychotherapy, EMDR, or it doesn't have to be, find what's right for you and find the right therapist, or even if it's a counselor or even a life coach, whatever works best for you. And, it might not be the same thing that I, found therapy with or that your friend or your family member. But yeah, find some help that you can go through if you've been through any kind of trauma in your life at all, even just as a kid, and now you're an adult and you don't know why you're having trouble with relationships or whatever, with jobs, with anything. It's probably has to do with that. So yeah, get some therapy.
Um, because the we are at the whereabouts tales, and I have a huge curiosity. Have you felt a cultural difference between the Midwest and California?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Can you get us through that?
Yeah, I don't want to put anybody down, but but the Midwest is very much they're very country there. And there's I don't know, it's kind of we're a lot more progressive and a lot more in California. It's a little bit more up to date. And in the Midwest, almost anywhere in the Midwest, they live a lot more in the past, and they do think, so when I got married this third time, this is my own name, this is my father's name, that a name I was born with that I went back to. A friend in Missouri said to me, you know isn't it against the law to not take your husband's name? And yeah, so that's kind of just says it all. And then also, like, so I do a lot of house and pet sitting now because I love it so much, and it's a big part of my own peace for me to be able to do that. So my husband says, he feels like a trucker wife because, I'm not home a lot, and he's totally fine with that. He knows that I love it so much. And but so some of my family and friends in the Midwest have said, well, like they can't believe that he can make his own dinner and do his own clothes and that I don't do that for him when I'm home either, like he's a fully functioning adult and he can do the stuff himself that the wife doesn't have to be there and take care of him, So, I mean, that kind of, those two things kind of show you what it's like in the Midwest. So in California, there's a lot less judgment too, and it depends on where you are. But, I see, anywhere I go, pretty much there's either transgender or there's somebody, from the LGBTQ plus community, and nobody is, saying or doing anything, um, you know, against them. So we've got a lot of the bathrooms are gender neutral bathrooms, and there are people and there are certain areas that are a little bit prejudiced, but for the most part, for the most of California, they're much more open-minded.
An important topic that you addressed, Pamela, you said you're doing dog sitting and house sitting, and I think
Yeah,
what's important to say is that, and it's obvious that this makes you happy.
yeah,
It's something which I can see only by you talking about this, and
yeah,
uh, maybe it's a lesson for everyone who's grinding in a career that they don't like, who's grinding for that extra $20 or $50 or €50 or 5,000 euros. They
yeah,
don't matter. This feeling that you see here, that I see here in you, it's amazing, and
yeah,
it's something that everyone should search for, because no, at the end, nobody cares. Nobody cares what you're doing. Nobody. As long as you are happy, that's the
right,
most important. And if you want to do whatever you want to do, it doesn't have to be a high achievement. We should not we 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 don't have all of us to be astronauts. We don't
right,
Not all of us have to be a scientist that discovered new things. No, 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 we can be happy doing something else, and this is the most important. That's
yes,
the only goal we should have in this life. It's too short to have a job, to fight for a job, to have these golden handcuffs on your hands that you
right.
cannot get out of. So I I have to say, I cannot because of the headphones, but
Right.
you have to imagine I didn't done this.
Yes, yes, I love it so much, and I'm glad that you recognize that. And I have said that myself, and I gave my daughter that advice when she was in college. Don't go for what's going to give you the most money. Go for what you love doing. What you feel like you will love doing in the long run. But don't be afraid also to try new things because you can change. Um, I was in my mid 50s or, close to, yeah, my mid 50s, I guess, when I quit nursing. And I actually took more classes and went to hypnotherapy. Just this year is when I decided that that wasn't really going so well. So,
Saying that you give the same message to your daughter, that she
yeah,
should not search for anything that gives her the extra $5,000 or however how much it is. She should search for something that makes her happy. And
yeah,
this is the thing which I'm struggling the most with my son. My son is still young. He's still 7 years old, so he still
mm-hmm,
has the whole life in front of him. But
yeah,
the only thing which I want to do is to tell him that he has to find a way to be happy, not to get the most amount of money, no, not to get the biggest career in his life. And if
right,
he wants to, if he finds a job that he likes, or if he finds something to do that can help him survive, that's the most important. Everything
yeah.
else is it's just
And not
nonsense.
not to try to please you or please his mother or anybody else or to do what his friends think he should do. And you can change too. This is what I was saying too, that at any point in time, if you felt like this was something that you were going to love doing and it turns out not to be quite right, you have that option to change, at any age. You don't have to stay stuck where you're not feeling happy,
You
even if it was something you enjoyed in the beginning.
you are going in a really important thing as well. Again, Pamela, to be able to change before that, you have to acknowledge the fact that you made a mistake. And that's not
Yeah.
something that everyone can do. And that's also something which is important for everyone to understand. Mistakes are happening and
Yeah.
everyone is making mistakes.
That's
And
life.
admitting them, it helps you move on.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's it.
it's life. And it might not even have been a mistake. I feel like it might
No,
have been the right thing at that time, but you've moved on from that, you
to be
know?
able to understand that is not the right thing, you have to admit in your head that maybe it was a mistake. So that's why I'm
Yeah.
saying not that you made a mistake when you took the decision, but to be able to change something, you have to admit
Yeah.
that you have done something which is, or you are in a situation which is not the perfect one. Yeah.
Right. It's that self-awareness of being
Exactly.
aware of how you feel in your situation. Yeah.
Um, Pamela, what took you from nursing to the holistic healing?
So I noticed pretty early on that there was a lot of corruption in nursing, and I noticed early on that we were just really, and I'm only speaking from my experience and for the US. So it might be different in different areas. But also, I noticed early on that it was much more about the business and not as much about caring for the patients or giving them the best care. So actually, I had started looking into holistic healing classes and courses about just a few years in nursing. And I did take some classes and courses, but because I was with that second husband and he wasn't working, I wasn't able to make that switch out of nursing to some other career that, wasn't going to make as much money, or it was going to be a risk to leave a job, a good job. So, so I already early on did not feel like it was something that was what it was cracked up to be or what, I thought it would be. So it wasn't until the pandemic, so it was actually before the pandemic. So it was 2019 that I started was getting anxious and getting depressed again a little bit, starting to feel myself, falling into that state of mind again. And I had to stop. And this is something I learned in therapy is, to take a step back and evaluate everything in my life. What is causing these feelings, and when do I notice this coming up, and what can I do differently? And I realized it was, being in the nursing and so much wasn't working. And that's why I said I wrote a whole book about the whole nursing career. And as you read it, you realize, why didn't she leave sooner? Just like the marriages. But it was just such a security blanket, because of the money, like we've said. So, so much was going wrong with that I was already looking for a different way and took more classes for hypnotherapy in 2019. And then 2020, the pandemic happened, the lockdowns happened, and that's when I was able to. So every 2 years, you need to renew your license in nursing. And so in 2021, it was coming up for renewal. And so I just let it lapse then. For the first time ever, I let it go and I didn't renew the license. And I was doing hypnotherapy for the last few years, but also doing pet and house sitting on the side at that time.
Can you explain us a bit what is hypnotherapy?
Yeah, so it feels very much like a guided meditation for anybody who knows what that
Mm-hmm.
is. And it works with the subconscious mind. So you put people into a state, into like an altered state with a full body relaxation. And it's not a full relaxation with your mind. It's because people think of it as quieting the mind, but that's where it differs from meditation, is where you're asking the subconscious mind to focus more while the body is fully relaxed. And then you just work on whatever issues are going on with the person, whatever they're looking to change in their life by the things that you say and, the changes that you offer their subconscious mind to focus on. Um, and how it differs from other forms of therapy is you're not at all talking about the past. Sometimes there are forms of hypnotherapy that go into like past lives and things like that. That wasn't something that I normally did, but there is that type of hypnotherapy. But usually you're focused forward, you're focused on the future, and you're looking how to um, change habits in your life, things that you are unhealthy habits change into healthy habits. That's what you're doing as you feel like you're in a guided meditation.
The benefits of I was talking to one of my previous guests, and I said that the benefits of meditation is the it's they are getting more and more recognized by all the
Yeah.
scientific community, and this is
Yeah.
a huge milestone. Because if I think if we talk about, I think 10 years ago, and you were telling a doctor I'm doing meditation, he would have said, you can do whatever you want, you have to take your pills.
You're
um,
right. Right. Or they would have thought it was totally a religious thing, that it was tied to your
exactly
religion. Yeah.
exactly. And I think this is something which is proven to be a huge benefit for mental health, and
Yeah.
from the mental health, also the physical health, because we have seen also in the past that in the last years that the connection between mental health and physical health is it's a close one.
Absolutely.
Have you experienced some people having misconceptions about hypnotherapy until now?
Oh,
I
yeah.
I barely kept my laugh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Lots of misconceptions. And I blame the media, there's movies and shows that have really put it in a bad light, and then there's also, I did a video on my own YouTube channel about um, considering stepping away from hypnotherapy. I was kind of talking it through in a video. And I said on there's a lot of creepy men and who seek your services for something that's unethical. And, you can use your imagination on that. But it has that whole that's one of the things that is a misconception with hypnotherapy, is that it can be used for something, um, I don't know, I get, in a sexual manner, or controlling, like a dominance over somebody. Um, so that's terrible. Um, there, and the misconception too is even without that creepy factor, people worry that they will lose control of their mind, or they will lose control of their body, or they won't know what's happening, and you will tell them to do something really, strange or whatever. Um, so, there's a lot of misconceptions with hypnotherapy, and that's one of the reasons, there's, probably many, but one of the reasons that I'm stepping away from it and not really doing that anymore. It's so hard to have to try to explain what it is and try to, I don't want to convince somebody to get hypnotherapy every time somebody, comes to me. So, or try to, dispel those myths.
It's interesting how people are trying to misuse something which is meant to be a benefit
Yeah.
for someone. This is yeah, but this says a lot about our way of being, that we are trying to take advantage of everything.
Yeah.
And it's showing us again, I think I said it a few times and I'm saying it again, that the power that people are having, that they want to keep it over people, over situations. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Um, what what do you love the most about hypnotherapy? If you'd be to take one thing that you pinpoint.
It can be so powerful in making changes pretty quickly. Some people have gone through years of therapy and they're just not getting past a certain block in their mind or their subconscious. And they can go for a few sessions of hypnotherapy and they can feel themselves starting to heal. And obviously that's not everybody, and it's not right for everybody, but I have seen it be so powerful and healing for people. And there are hypnotherapists that work with people, um, to have like a more natural childbirth. There are hypnotherapists that work with people with serious medical conditions, and it helps them through that whole process. I was doing more of helping people with some losing weight and quitting smoking, which is the real kind of standard, but also to have a different mindset, to build more confidence and to be able to, reach their goals. It just their goals in life, and self-discovery, things like that.
The the benefits of it are incredible. I did while doing the research for this episode, I did read a lot about it, and I think the benefits for it
Mm.
are incredible. And
Yeah.
you 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 increase my curiosity on the topic.
Oh, good.
I I look into a lot of things. I have a natural curiosity. I don't know.
Hmm.
I cannot connect it to anything, but I'm
It's good.
curious.
It's good.
And I also look in this parallel treatment because I don't believe in the normal medicine anymore. I have the same problem that you just mentioned, and I think that the only thing that the medicine, the today's medicine is the only purpose that it's left is making money. And
Hmm.
independent of the fact if it's US and it's everything as a private insurance, or it's Europe and you have the the normal health system which is trying to get all the money from you without giving you
Yeah.
anything. Nobody cares about your story.
Yeah.
Nobody cares about your problems. They only say, okay, you have that, yeah, take these 2 pills and you are fine. And
Yeah.
that's not the reason why I'm here. And this is something that it's interesting. I was looking a lot into psychedelics because I
Hmm.
think that's also an interesting thing that people are beginning to admit the benefits of those trips
Yeah.
that exist that are guided trips, of course.
Right. Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Important, not street
Not
trips
just on
because
your own from some guy on the corner. Yeah. Right. Right.
because he has
Yeah.
the good stuff.
Right.
Mm.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I think the benefits of this I would just call it alternative medicine.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's something that everyone should look into. We are not. I am not pretending to be an expert in anything. I'm just doing
Yeah.
my reading, and I think
Yeah.
that's what everyone should do. And they should try to find for their own purpose or their own problems some solutions because it's so easy today. It's so easy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It takes patience and diligence, but, find what's right for you. Absolutely. And there's so many different types of, healing modalities and methods that have nothing to do with, medication. And I don't want to say that all medications are bad or that all doctors are wrong or anything like that, but there is too much emphasis on just making money and yeah, just basically running it like a business with not any you don't feel like you're cared about by the medical system. So yeah,
Making
there's
money and increasing the dependency, the addiction.
right, right. Absolutely. Yep, I
It
totally
scares
agree.
me. It scares me a lot thinking that there are kids who are being from treated for ADHD with with pills from
Yeah,
5 years old. I think that's wrong on so
yeah,
many levels. I'm not saying
yeah.
I'm not questioning the diagnosis. No, I'm not.
Right.
I'm not questioning it. I'm not able to. But I think it's so wrong to give them medication from that age because the only thing that you are managing to do is making them addicted.
Right, right. And it's just the symptoms. It's like let's get down to the root of it. What's really going on and how can we change what's really going on?
Exactly. Pamela, you mentioned a few times the books that
Yeah.
you did write already and the book that you are writing at the
Yeah.
moment. What what inspired you to start writing?
So the first one is really the whole life story, and I started writing that more as a journal in while I was in therapy. So I wanted to, like I said, I was really being able to connect those dots and see things more clearly, and writing it down was a big part of that. And so I started as a journal, and while I was going through therapy and while I was writing, I was reading other memoirs from women who had made it out of some bad situations and went on to thrive and to live their life and love their life. And so that helped me to know that it was possible. And as I was writing out my story just for myself, I realized, that maybe I should look into publishing this, that maybe my story could also, help somebody to realize, because I'm older, I was already 50, when I was in therapy and that, and I was a little bit older than a lot of these other women who had written about their trying times as a child, and then they made it out, and now they're in their 30s or 40s, living life and doing great things in the world. And here I know women, that were a little bit older might feel stuck and like, oh, they're just kind of waiting for the end. They're just gonna live in that stuck place. And just, so women can know, or people in general can know, that it doesn't matter how old you are, that there is still hope, and also, like I had said before, I didn't grow up in a home that I was beaten. I didn't have any physical abuse. I didn't have alcoholics or drug addicts in my childhood with my parents or anything. Um, so I wasn't trafficked or sold, or, there's some really, really horrific things that people go through. My story is more of, so many people can relate. So many people have gone through something similar that what I have gone through. And to give those stories, to know that your story matters. It doesn't have to be a really unbelievable, horrific thing to matter, and to validate that the feelings of this high anxiety, this depression, this total mental breakdown, to sort of validate that, yeah, of course you went through that and you can come out of that. So that was the inspiration for publishing it, but I started writing it for me.
Hmm. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
again, I said it a few times, and whoever is watching every episode of this, I think is sick of this. But the most important thing is that you do it for yourself.
Yeah.
Everything that we do, like writing music. I had some guys having being the lead singer in some bands. I keep saying the same. Do it for yourself. If you like
Yes.
what you do, then
Yeah.
you'll find that the amount of people that are thinking exactly like you, and they will like what you do, and that's
Yeah.
it. Were there chapters that were particularly hard to write, Pamela?
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. So mostly the chapters with my second husband during that time was
Mhm.
really hard to write because it was still pretty fresh,
Mhm.
and I would have nightmares, and I would have even like flashbacks. So, during the time of therapy and when I first left, I didn't realize all that had happened because I really just focused on my job and like what he was doing and what he needed. And when I got away from that, I think I kind of, um, disassociated almost, like I
Mhm.
put it in the background and tried to hide it under the rug, and tried to put it away. Um, but I started having flashbacks, and memories kept coming up in flashes when I was awake. And so definitely had an effect on me while I was writing. And it gets very graphic. And, some of the stuff in my early teens, some of the essay that happened, and it was hard to write it out, and just writing from my own memory, and certain things I had to put the book away, put the writing away. I mean, I was doing it on my computer, but just, not looking at it, not picking it up again for a couple weeks or maybe even a couple months, and then going back to it when I felt ready. So yeah, it was definitely hard to write, and it's hard to read, but at the end of it, to just know that, I'm healing, and I get to this point in my life and near the end. So yeah.
In one of the previous episodes, I had Jay, who's also she's also a writer,
Mm,
and she said that she described the experience when she went. She was also writing her story as a healing process as well, but she decided to take fiction. So she
mm,
created a parallel world. Quite interesting story, really interesting story. But what I want to say, she described the moment in which she went into the bookstore and she saw first time her book on the bookshelf, and
mm.
she said that it was a surreal experience. How was your
Yeah.
feeling when you first had the book in your hand?
Yeah, it was surreal, but I self-published with the help of Amazon. So
Mm-hmm.
my book is on Amazon and on Kindle. It's not in a bookstore anywhere.
Okay.
But still, when you see it, when you put your name in the Amazon search and you see, your own writing, it is. It's surreal for sure. And then when you order a copy, just to look through it, and have it in your hand, like you said, and I've had people ask me for autographed copies, and it's like, that's crazy. So yeah, yeah, just amazing.
I'm planning to do to get the Your Life Story book and
Hmm.
make it as a giveaway when I publish this episode, because I think it's important that whomever is seeing this story is able to also to read the book.
Oh, nice. Nice. Thank
It's
you.
really nice. No, nothing to thank me about. I thank you for taking your time for this. It was for me. It's an amazing experience until now. um, what does a day of your life look like today, Pamela?
So every day is different because I do the house and pet sitting. So when I'm not away doing that, I am either recording as a guest or recording with guests for my own podcast or recording just for my own YouTube channel. And, my husband and I get to spend time together when I'm home. Like I said, we have this habit of these nighttime walks that we'll do before bed, and that's really nice. Um, but what's so great is like I'm living my own life and anything I want to do, then I do it. Anything I want to try. If I want to take more classes or if I want to something I want to learn about, I'm interested in, I just feel the freedom to fully explore my own self and who I am. And I guess that, I kind of went off track there a little bit, but every day is different and it's my own, and that's what matters. Um, you know, if I, if I'm not, I do a lot of reading, I do a lot of writing, um, spending time with my husband. When I'm home, I'll try to get some friend time in, like just go to eat or go for a walk with a friend. Um, so yeah, talking with my son.
The most
Yeah.
important thing is that you decide on your own. You
Right, right.
decide on your own. Um, Pamela, if you could go back and talk to your, I know it's a cliche question, but if you could go back and talk to your younger self, what would you tell her?
Well, I already had brought this up, but just that you matter. I would tell my younger self that I matter and to not give up on dreams. Like I said, I didn't know that I could go to college as a poor person, and I just kind of gave up on ever having any kind of, quote unquote good life. So to know that you can do anything you want to do, it might take some working through and it might take some work to get there, but that you can do anything you want to do because you matter, your life matters. So yeah.
What advice would you give to someone um, who feels that it's too late to change their life?
Well, it's never too late, obviously. I think as long as you're alive and breathing and as long as you have your, you know, you could be in your 70s and if you don't have dementia or something, then if you're in your 70s or how 80s, it doesn't matter. If you're alive and breathing and you have your mental capacities with you, there's always time for change. You never know. You might live to 100. I might live for 10 years only. I might live for, 30 more years. Who knows? You never know. And yeah, so there's no such thing as too old, to change or too old to make a difference. Um, I don't have it in front of me, but I know that there are quite a few stories of famous people that we know of, that we have all heard of that didn't start their fame and what they're doing, to change the world and to change their life. They didn't start that until their 70s or even 80s or, some in their 60s and that. So there's a lot of those stories out there. So search for them if you're that age and you're looking to change. Yeah.
I keep saying that we cannot control how long, but we can control how we live the
Yeah.
years that we have to live.
Yeah.
We are not in control about the length for sure,
Right.
but we are in control of how we live and
Yeah.
what decision we take and for whom we take the decisions, and we should take the decision for us, not for everyone else, for anyone
Yeah,
else.
I love that. Yeah.
Um, what are you looking forward to in the next chapter of your life?
So I'm looking forward to, you know, I, and this is kind of going way off track, but I'm kind of studying mediumship right now. I'm reading books on mediumship just because it's so fascinating to me. And I had always had sort of a connection even as a child. And so I feel like I've always been so busy in my life, and finally is the time that I have time to put into the study of it. So that's kind of one thing I'm working on right now. Also, like I said, writing that third book, just continuing to do what I love until it doesn't feel like I love it anymore. You know? So making all these new fur friends, I love it so much, and I love I'm ever since writing that first book, I kind of caught that bug of writing, so I enjoy writing. So yeah, just more of the same and continuing to build on my interest. Yeah.
Your your motto, which I love, I did not come so far, this far, to only come this far.
Yeah.
I have had an episode with someone moving from India to UK, which is also a
Hmm.
huge leap of faith, and she actually used that. And
Oh yeah, yeah. I heard it in a song and I was like, oh, oh my gosh. Yeah.
can you please try to explain it for our listeners? Maybe it's interesting to hear it from your side.
Yeah. So you mean explain the title?
Yeah, yeah. Explain the mantra.
Yeah. So once you get out of whatever stuck place or dark place you're in, you didn't come that far because obviously it would have taken a lot of work to get there. You didn't come that far to just stay there. It's like, okay, now I'm on like you're in a deep dark hole and you make it up to the top of the hole. You're not going to sit on that edge the rest of your life. You have further to go. You made it out of that so that you can grow and learn and expand and move in your life. You didn't come out of that hole. You didn't come that far to just sit there on the edge and exist. It's like you almost have no choice once you're out of there to continue to see what you can do and, follow your interest.
And
Follow your bliss, as they used to say.
absolutely, absolutely. And with that, enjoy the process.
Yes.
Pamela, before we wrap this up, I usually have my rapid fire questions that I ask all the guests, and I have five that I managed to tailor based on your
Okay.
story. Um, what's one word you'd use to describe your healing journey?
One word I would use to describe my healing journey. Um, Perseverance. Yeah.
You mentioned a lot of them, but what's the bravest thing that you've ever done if you'd have to pinpoint one?
The bravest thing I've ever done. Well, I think it was coming here, coming to California. I mean, at
Mhm.
the time I didn't think it was brave, but thinking back on it, yeah, I think that was the bravest thing I've done.
Coffee, tea, or meditation first thing in the morning?
Meditation. Yeah, when I wake up, I'm giving thanks. I'm meditating on gratitude and just thank you, thank you, thank you. And there's a quote of I don't know who Meister Eckhart. I think if the only prayer you ever said in your entire life was thank you, it will have been enough. Something like that. And I totally live by that. I love that. Yeah.
I would dare to say first thing in the morning podcast because it's still early in my place.
Yeah.
Eh, if you could tell the world one truth about trauma recovery, what would it be?
Again, perseverance, it takes
Hmm.
patience and diligence, to find what's going to work for you and not to give up if you don't find what's good for you right away, because there's so many different modalities and methods and treatments out there that, it might take a while to find what's really gonna be right for you.
Um, at the end, I usually get some recommendations from my guest, and I would like to ask you which book, besides your own, has changed your life?
So you probably have heard this one a lot, but The Body Keeps Score is
Hmm.
so good. um, Especially for anybody going through anything, especially on a healing journey. My therapist had lent me that book. So when I first started in therapy, that's when I first was introduced to that book, and I read it at that time. So I would recommend, The Body Keeps Score. I don't know the author offhand, but just with that title, you'll find it if you
I
just do a
have
search.
I have read When the Body Says No from Gabor Mate, which is somehow going into the same direction,
Yeah,
but impressive book. Impressive
yeah.
book. What's your what's one musical recommendation that you can give us?
I am not really a music person. I like to listen to just like instrumental, like spa music or meditation music.
Hmm.
So, so yeah, that's really, I think that's all I can
But
come up with for that.
that's something which is absolutely fine. Um, Pamela, I want to thank you for your time today. For me, it was an impressive journey.
Well,
Even though
thank you.
it was 5 a.m. When we started this in my time zone, it got me awake really fast, I have to say.
Yeah,
Um, your story is kind of reminding us that independent of the circumstances, we have the power to change the narrative. And sometimes it means getting on the bus and heading into a place that you heard about, but you don't really know.
yeah.
Sometimes it means seeking help or
Mm-hmm.
embracing a new passion or writing, maybe a
Yeah,
kind of art. Um, but your journey shows us that courage and perseverance, I think you said it twice, and I think that's really, really important,
yeah,
can help you get into through an amazing transformation. And um, you are the living proof of that. And I
yeah.
have to say thank you for trusting me with your story.
Mm. Well, thank you for having me. Absolutely.
And I hope that by the time you finish the next book, you drop me an email so that we can do this again.
Okay, okay, I will.
I would love to. Pamela, thank you so much. Have a
Thank
nice,
you.
good evening. Talk to you
You
soon.
too.
Bye.
Have a great day.